This is the Creative Soulpreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Demas. Let's go. Hey, friend, welcome back to the show. Today's guest is one of those people that, when you meet somebody and you just have this instant connection, instant chemistry, instant, dare I say, LOVE, like you just know that they're like you in some way, shape, or form, or that you have a deep connection that goes beyond the moment of when you just met. Like, I'm like, is this past life? What the hell is going on here? That is the guest that I have today. We met on the on the film festival. That was like Scooby-Doo. Scooby-Doo. On the film festival circuit, both promoting our films, and he has an amazing film, many amazing films actually that we'll talk about. But welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. What a sweet introduction and factual. Very factual because it was mutual. And I think it's because we're bald and we're wearing dark colors today. So you can see the connection already in
The
this
connection
call.
is because we're both bald, you know.
Exactly. And like dark colors. Anyway, how are you doing?
I am, thank you for asking. Nobody asked that. You're the first
Oh,
person to ever like turn it back on me and be like, "How are you doing?"
exactly.
Uh, I'm good. I'm really good today. I just got to see you last week.
Yeah.
So, actually it was only a few days ago now that I realize it. It feels like last week, but it's only been a couple of days.
Yeah. It's wild.
So, for my audience who doesn't know you and hasn't yet had instant love, although they're going to very quickly, um, let's take back a bit. Let's go back before we really talk about who you are today. And I want to hear growing up. Yeah, I see your face. Those of you who are listening to the podcast and not seeing it, his face just had like did a change. It was like this like softening in a way. Um, Take me back to where you grew up, and more importantly, what did you love to do? How did you play?
Oh, I love that. I grew up right outside Caracas, Venezuela. So I grew up in a small town called San Antonio de los Altos. It was about like a 30-minute drive or less from Caracas. And I grew up from my parents were both Portuguese immigrants. And so I grew up with already having sort of the immigrant experience. And yeah, and so I think I had a great childhood in terms of love from my family, and a lot of struggles in school. But to sort of answer your question about how did I play, I spent a lot of time alone, believe it or not. Um, I used to role play a lot. I used to be obsessed with dinosaurs. In fact, my another career path that I was looking at when I was a child was a paleontologist. I saw Jurassic Park and I was just like, that's it. I want dinosaurs. And I was obsessed and I was really curious about how they live, what were the connections between each other, how come this thing didn't exist anymore? And so I spent a lot of time in my imagination and I mean it was really to the point where my mom, I remember even she was like, you need to play more with like friends, you need to have more friends. I had very few friends. I had like maybe two or three, and they were the friends that I had from early childhood all the way until the end of high school. I was not very social in that way. Um, I mean, we can go deep here, but it was like it was rooted in many different things, right? Rooted on the fact that I was bullied in school a lot, so I didn't feel safe in that
Mhm.
environment. And so that was one element. So I kept my group really tight because there were the very few people that I really felt safe to be myself with. And then at home, I was scared to interact with a lot of the kids in the neighborhood because I was afraid of them in a way. And so stayed, I like kept to myself a lot. And
I
so,
get that. I really relate to that. I I grew up in rural Montana for the first, 12 years.
Mm.
And I didn't have any friends. I mean, I truly did not have any friends those first 12 years. And I very much kept to myself and lived in an imaginary space, in an imaginary world, which, I think that in many ways was not only a protection mechanism, right? But it was an escape, but it was also in many ways what eventually became a superpower,
Yeah, right.
you know?
I feel the same way.
Yeah. That's why I was like, "Oh, I relate," because it really felt that way. Like I remember this birthday party that my mother decided to have for me that I did
Mm.
not want to have. And I knew I couldn't find five boys, five friends to come.
Oh my God. Oh my
And my
God.
mother like demanded that I have this birthday party. And these neighborhood kids came and they didn't want to be there. And I didn't
Oh.
want them there. And it was like the most awkward, awful experience.
That happened to me similarly. Like my mom threw a birthday party and my sister was going to the same school that I was. She was older. She's like 4 years older than me. And she would see these kids that were in my class and she would like them because my sister was popular. I was not. And so my sister would be like, "Oh, invite so and so and invite so and so." And she would invite them to my birthday party. And so some of them came. And of course, it was the same thing. I didn't really want them there. And then my mom one day goes to one of them who was kind of one of my bullies. And by the way, I was not like out or anything like that. I was just sort of like, living in my world. And my mom at one point, he brought a birthday gift, because I'm sure the mom was like, "You need to bring this to a birthday party." And my mom's like, "Are you gonna say thank you? Say thank you. Give each other like a kiss on the cheek or something." And the guy looked at me like, "What?" And I know, and me too. I was just like, "What are you saying, mom?" Like, it was just everything that just made it worse and worse and worse and worse. So yeah, that was awful. I relate. I did not know that about you.
Yeah. Oh yeah. But like as you said, it developed this imagination.
Hmm.
How did that play out? Like how did you said you sort of were in like a imaginative space, but did you write? Did you draw? Like how did that like then manifest?
I would role play a ton. I would not only with like action figures and stuff like that, but with costumes. I would create characters. I would look up jokes and I would like tell jokes to my families like during parties. I would be like a little stand-up comedian, which is not what I do, but I would do a lot of that. And in the joke telling, I would come up with voices and I really spent a lot of time doing that. And then I also spent a lot of time singing. Singing was the thing that really was escape for me because it was one of the very few times when I was home alone that I felt really free and beyond just creating voices. I really it was like my entire use of my body was kind of engaged in that, and so I really felt um joy, a tremendous joy in that until a teacher noticed. And that's when things started to sort of I started to sort of put together that idea that you're talking about, like that superpower and like how that imagination was starting to serve me somehow. Um, yeah, it must have been like 10 or 11 when I think a teacher was looking for someone to represent the school in like a singing competition thing. And he did like auditions in the classroom, very, very low key. And then he ended up choosing me and I started to work with him. And part of this is when I started to really understand that it wasn't just about hitting the notes and sounding nice, but it was about the story that I was telling with it. That's really when that started to really land at that age. Um,
Similar age for me. Mrs. Olson, sixth grade teacher, said,
okay.
"Nick, you're going to write the school play."
What a big task.
That's what I thought. And I was like, I can't write. She's like, yeah, you can. You're going to write that school play. And there was something, that she saw in me that I didn't yet see in myself, right? She saw that imaginative kid. She saw that kid that was probably pretty lonely, right? And
Yeah.
it was interesting because it, in many ways, forced me to then be the center of this experience with these children. And suddenly they had to listen to me. They didn't have a choice, which was very interesting, in retrospect. But then I was like directing and at 12, directing and
That's
producing
good.
and writing the play, and everyone had to listen to me, right? But it did garner a new sense of understanding or respect for me in a very strange way. Um, yeah, I never really put that together until just now, actually. That's interesting.
It's interesting that you say that you gain that you gain, but that it provided a different kind of respect. With me, like, of course, I had a similar thing where the teachers, I was representing the school. So what ended up happening is it's like, okay, for this event, we're gonna do the national anthem, and then you're gonna sing it, right? And so
Hmm.
I would have to stand in front of schools, in front of the entire school, and I went to a very small school, just to put things in perspective, from first grade all the way to high school, it was the same building.
Oh,
So
wow.
so you had the entire range of age groups all in the same place.
Oh,
Very small,
wow.
only one class per grade. And so and so another little thing about that is that the people that you were with first grade are the same people that you were with in second grade, and you grew up together, literally the same people. And so that can be amazing because you can build some really strong relationships, but it could also be a nightmare because the bullies that you have in
Hmm.
your classroom follow you for 18 years of your life,
Yeah.
right? Or a little less, or whatever long that is. And so I had to go and stand in front of everyone and like sing and then either be praised by a few and a target for many. And so school became this really weird place for me. It was scary and also was the only place that I felt like I was also doing my thing. It was really a weird time.
How has that affected you as the artist that you are today?
Huge. I mean, I still to this day, I mean, a lot of my work now artistically is focused on, navigating whatever internalized narratives I have about myself and trying to find the root of where they come from. And, you know, with Safe Word, it was about that, for example. It was about me really diving head on and facing as this external character, right? Like what I say to myself and how I say it to myself and confront that and try to find a way to love it and to love myself. So it's the formative years. My therapist always says to me that, like, when you spend 30 something years of your life saying something to yourself a certain way, you can't expect for that voice to go away or for you to have a different relationship with it in 3, 5, 10 years, right? You're talking
Yeah.
about like the formative years. And so it has become sort of a life mission for me to create art and to create work that speaks to that, speaks to, and particularly the queer experience, because, I grew up in Venezuela. I was not, that was the only thing that made me feel different. I mean, my parents were Portuguese immigrants, but we were also in the minority in that regard. But I never felt, I mean, there were some jokes, but I never felt like that had the same kind of impact emotionally as the gay kid or the kid with a little bit of a sway or a little bit of a limp wrist, like that had an impact. And I would go home and I would cry and I could not say why to my parents,
Hmm.
right?
God, I so relate to that. Yeah.
Say why, because then they would know.
Yeah. Then they would know. Then they'd find you out. You'd be found out.
Exactly. Exactly.
So you got recognized for singing, right? For your voice, for that part of the imagination. At what point did you say, "Oh, I might be able to do this for a living"?
At the age of 15, I was like, that's it. I'm gonna be a performer. This is where I feel most alive. I feel free. I feel like myself. I felt love for the first time in doing that, right? I felt love from strangers doing that.
Hmm.
So I really was just like, this is it. But I moved to the US when I was 17. There was a dictatorship starting in Venezuela, like in the like late 90s. And so I was just like, yeah, I need to leave. And also a lot of the movies that I was watching and a lot of this entertainment I was consuming was American entertainment, right? Like all the movies have subtitles. And I started to wonder, well, where are they made, right? Oh, America. And so when the opportunity came for me to move here, I took it. And, as a new immigrant, I had like choices to make. I had money to make. I didn't come from generational wealth. I had to like work. My first job was at an insurance agency that my cousin in Connecticut worked at. And I was basically the office assistant. So I was working doing that, making money. But then by the back of my head, I was like, I need to invest and commit somehow to that initial mission that I had of being a performer. And so that's when I started to go to school and I started really small steps, right? Community college, taking some classes, and then I transferred, and then I auditioned, and then I got into a bigger school, and it just was a slow progression that way. But it was a lot of um, different paths that were taking me in different places.
Did your family stay in Venezuela or did they come to the States as well?
So my parents they got divorced when I was like 7 years old, and my dad had family in the U.S. like siblings uh, so when my parents migrated to Venezuela when they were kids because there was a civil war in Europe. It's just
Hmm.
like constant in my entire generation of life. Everybody's moving, escaping bad governments. Um, a lot of the siblings of my dad's side got kind of like spread out, and some of them landed in the US and some of them landed in Venezuela. So my dad landed in Venezuela. When my parents got divorced, my dad decided to move to the US to be with sort of his sisters,
Mm,
sort of start a new life. Um, and my mom stayed in Venezuela. And so when I moved to the US, I moved in with my dad.
I
And
see.
yeah, and my mom is in Venezuela and she's still in Venezuela, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking, wow, that's a big leap at 17.
Yeah, but I had no other choice. This is the thing. I mean, I had a choice to stay, but I knew I wouldn't. I knew I couldn't reach my goal of living the life that I wanted to live. And I also knew that I, even though there's a lot of the LGBTQ community is under threat, has been for many, many years. And back when I moved to the US in 2002, right after 9/11. Like,
Mm.
it wasn't like gay people were welcomed and loved, right? But it was still better than what I had.
Yeah.
Still felt hope doing that. I had no choice.
Yeah, I ran to New York at 19 for that very reason,
Yeah.
to get out of, those bullies from school, from a, more rural way of life, out of fear in many ways,
Same,
and with a great desire to be fully myself.
same. And my parents, my mom, both of them were very supportive about my decision to do this. They were really, of course they were heartbroken. My moms were heartbroken, right? That I was leaving her and sort of like truly, going on my own. And I think that just happens to a lot of parents in general when the kids graduate high school,
Mm.
right? But to move to another country is a different, it's a different story here. And so, yeah, it was really hard. And I moved here and I struggled. I struggled a lot emotionally for the first like 3 years. I was really, you know, missing my mom, missing my family. And I mean, I still loved a lot of things about there. Like my first winter, I remember I was just like, what am I doing here? You know, like, what am I doing here? I was in Venezuela with beautiful beaches every
Yeah, what
weekend.
are you doing in the
Oh my
snow?
God. And my mom would used to be like, well, come back,
Yeah.
come back. You have a home here. You have everything you need here. Come back. And I would be like, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't. I
What did
couldn't.
you, now looking back, what did you learn from those 3 years that were so difficult about yourself?
I learned that it's really that in those moments I really the determination that I had was kind of surprising to me. That I was willing to sacrifice so much for an idea, a vision, or something. Um, that that was sort of the first time where I really it started to really register with me that I was someone that once I have my heart set on something, that there's no way to shake me out of it.
Mm,
Because it felt like survival, life or
yeah.
death.
Yeah. Yes. Fight or flight.
That's what art feels like to me.
Mm,
Yeah, so if I get an idea about a movie, a character, or something, and I set my mind for it, there's no stopping it. I mean, at all, at all. I mean, Safewood was like that. I said to myself, I said these words out loud, and this is not good advice, but I said, I will do this movie even if it kills me. It was that level. I just go, I'm willing to sacrifice it all to make this happen. And I mean, even the fact that, even the concept of a safe word, right, is that you say something that takes you out of a situation, you go back to your comfort zone or your safety place or your safe place, your safe place, right? Even in that, when I was like developing it, I remember saying to myself, my safe word for this particular artistic process is I quit, and I'm not gonna say it.
mm.
This is the one thing I'm not gonna say in this process is that I'm gonna push through all the way until the end.
I kept saying that on the documentary that we shared in the film festival together in Body Electric. I kept saying, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to stop. I mean, that was a 7 year process. And and it was fits and starts and raise some money and run out of money and start again and have a pandemic that shuts you down for 2 years. And I still kept saying, I'm not stopping. I'm not
Mhm.
stopping. I'm not stopping. Just wasn't going to happen. It was in me and it was going. I'm a Taurus. I'm
Mhm.
I'm bullheaded. I'm determined. I also believe that there's this something that I was raised with, which was if you start something, you finish it.
Mhm. I'm not that way.
You're not,
No,
but you were about this.
I worry about this because I think the difference is I have to really believe it and want it so badly. It has to feel that kind of existential thing. I'm a Gemini, so I'm like, this is interesting. Oh, this is interesting now. And this is interesting now,
Mm,
right? But if something really grabs me and it feels existential to my survival, and not just in the terms of in an emotional survival, in a way that like it just feels like I need to express this wholeheartedly, then there's no giving up.
mm.
Then there's no thing that's gonna shake me out of that, right? Same with love, right? Same with like all of these things that I want so badly.
It's interesting because there's two pieces to it for me. One is that I am bullheaded. I'm bullish. Like if I get something in my brain that I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna do it, and I'm gonna do it at the 100%, 110% decibel A, which has been like part of my success, but also at a cost
Right,
sometimes.
right.
The other part is part two, B, I'm incredibly loyal.
Yeah.
And for everyone who worked on the project, I was doing it for them as well. That they
Yeah.
put in their time, energy, for a lot of them, not as much money as not a lot of them, all of them weren't paid what they are not only worth and valued at, but what they typically would make. And so I felt this deep sense of loyalty to them in a way to make that project happen. But I feel that way on every project that I work on. I have this I have this realization as we're talking. Once I'm in, I'm in.
Yeah. I feel the same way once I'm in a minute, and also to talk about like the people that because art you can't make alone, like especially movies, right? Such a collaborative process. I had the same thing, and I said this even to the team. I was just like, I'm paying you, but I'm not paying you really what you're worth. Like you're worth
Hmm.
more. And those were some of the moments, well, especially when I was in pre-production and throughout the entire process, where I felt that love is not sort of a feeling or something that is like ephemeral or a sensation. It's like they were doing this because they loved the piece, the art, and by extension me.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it just
Yeah.
felt a sense of these people, I owe them so much, you know.
And
So
yet they were happy to be there. They were happy to support. They were happy to be a part of it. They don't feel owed. They don't.
I, I know that's amazing to me. That's amazing to me.
But wouldn't you do it for somebody else? You have.
Yeah. And I have,
You
yeah, of course.
have.
Okay. Yeah, but you know something about that? Sometimes it's easier for me to believe that it's easy for me to give love to someone and to give my time and my energy to someone. And this is something like maybe I'll need to go back to therapy about this. Um, but maybe there's something but I have a hard time feeling okay with somebody else doing that for me.
With receiving.
Yeah, with receiving that, I feel like, are
Yeah.
you sure? Like, I don't know, right? But me giving it, happy to.
The last time I went back to therapy was because I literally walked into to their therapist's office and said, "I'm here because I don't know how to receive."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's hard. It is
It's
hard.
harder to receive than it is to give. People say it's better to give than it is to receive. It's actually harder to receive than it is to give. At least it is for me. And it sounds like it is for you.
It is for me. And I've noticed that it is for a lot of people that I've met
Yeah.
too. Yeah. Even giving compliments to someone, right? Like I
Yeah.
recently had a conversation with a friend and I was giving him a compliment. He goes, oh, well, I don't know about that. I know, whatever. And I go, just say thank you.
Hmm.
Just receive it. Just say thank you, right? It's a moment of reflection where I just go, I do that too. So I understand how hard it is.
A good friend of mine helped me understand that. I actually think I've talked about that before on the podcast. Of my friend Tom said to me, "You're hurting my feelings by not receiving the gift."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Whoa, okay." Yeah.
Yeah, whoa.
Whoa. Okay. I'd not thought of it in those terms. Okay. Okay. Going back to your journey, your creative journey here, because this is the season of creative journey. You now are in school. You
Mhm.
are beginning to build a career.
Mhm.
What did that look like?
Um, well, it was kind of not what I expected at all. I went to acting school. I went to Marymount Manhattan College in New York City, and I was studying acting specifically to get a degree in acting. This is after me trying to do digital design and then switching my major because I was just like, no, stick to sorry that I'm diverging here, but like I remember I have this process where I have an idea and then I try everything else around the idea for me to feel confident to then commit to the idea, right?
Yeah, I
And
get that.
I do it with everything in my life, and it's just like, why am I wasting all this time? But no, it's part of the process. I've
It's your
come to
process. This is your creative process.
the creative process, exactly. So it looked like, at first, it looked like I wanted to be in design, like I wanted to be and doing a film production in terms of like sound design, editing, that kind of world. And I did that for a semester, and then I took a theater class that I had to take because it was one of the electives, and that was the only one that's available. And in the theater class, my theater professor goes to me and says, "You're a performer, and so I don't know why you're not doing this." And I went home and I reflected over the course of like a couple of weeks, and I switched my major. And then I was just like, I need to stick true to who I am. And then I started to audition for bigger schools to transfer, and that's when I started to go to Marymount. And then after, I mean, it was a crazy time. It was an amazing time. I was living in New York City. I was feeling like I had made it already, you know? I was going from my dorm in Midtown, walking up to the Upper East Side, rehearsing all day long, taking voice and speech and acting and scene study and working with my classmates and hearing stories about the friends of the friends that are already on Broadway. And it just felt like so close, right? It just was like in the middle of it. I would just go, I made it. I had made it. And then I graduated. And then, we did a showcase. I got an agent. And then I started to go out on auditions. It was kind of crazy how that happened. Um, and then I started to do a lot of TV commercials, believe it or not. And I did for, I don't know if I want to get into this, but I did like, I think my first audition I booked, and my agent was really happy about it, of course. Um, that wasn't like a regular event, me booking, just like any other actor, right? But I booked like a Target Christmas thing for Latin America. And of course, that was like I was like my first time on a professional set, right? With like I had a green screen and I had this entire globe. I was inside of a snow globe that was built on set, and it was like my first experience going like, oh, this are all these people are, and I would just show up and be the talent. It was just amazing. Um, and then I started to feel like I was going to a lot of commercial stuff and some theater auditions, but I just felt a little bit lost in sort of the material. I felt like I wasn't expressing really myself, especially when you train in acting school and you do Shakespeare and you do Moliere and you do, Ibsen, and then you do all of these writers, and then you go and audition and you start to book commercial work. Oh, you start to feel like, whoa, I feel a disconnect here. And then I met a directing student from Colombia who was devising a piece, and it was my first encounter with devised theater. And devised theater, I don't know if people are familiar, but it's theater that starts with people and not a script. And we were doing an adaptation of a Shakespeare of The Tempest using um, uh, uh, news articles about the refugee crisis in the Pacific Ocean. Rio, because she's Australian, and so she really wanted to focus on that. But I had to improvise a lot, and we had to do research. And I started to think more as a generator of material, and then creating art, a performance with it, and devising the movement. And really, that was I think, the moment where I think my career took a shift. And then I started to really focus on devised theater, and I made it a really big part of my career until recently. I mean, that set it off. I mean, every play that I did in New York following that was a devised play, whether it was through a small theater company, through the Bushwick Star in Brooklyn. I worked with Superhero Clubhouse. That was a company within a company. Theater 167, a small theater company in Queens. And then I was doing a lot of that kind of theater work, which it was all about collecting stories, the collective experience of our own humanity as artists, and then putting that in a package, in an artistic narrative with the framing device that could get people to listen. Um, that changed my life completely. That set it off completely. And then even here, I live now in DC, and I moved to DC to do that kind of work, to do that work at Gala Hispanic Theater with immigrant communities. I did plays with young people from El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Guatemala. And then I was working with, and then after that, I started to work at Arena Stage, doing that kind of work with local communities. And it was just that became, until recently, became like the thing. And then I felt, I'm talking too much. And then I felt,
This is
no,
an
no.
interview. You're good.
And then, now here's the thing. Then I felt that I was doing a lot of storytelling inspired by other people,
Yeah.
right? And then I started to feel lost too, and started to go, well, what about my story?
Well, that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Is in this journey, there's lots of ups and downs, right? In the career path of any creative, there's
Oh yeah.
these high highs and these low lows. What did all these things teach you? What were the lessons in this path that then led you to telling your own story? Stories.
So stories. I one, I learned that everybody's experience is way more similar than what I thought they might be, right? I
Yeah.
really felt a strong sense of community that I also, I understood that I wasn't like special,
Yeah.
right? Right,
Yeah.
that I was like, I'm just another human being, and everybody has that sort of potential of an extraordinary story coming out of them. And so that somehow gave me the sensation of, well, maybe I do have a story to tell. I've never believed that I'm interesting, right? And I think it was towards like halfway through my work at Arena Stage when I was working with some students, I started to feel like I have something to tell. I have a story to tell, and I don't know where to begin, how to do this, or have the confidence to do it on my own, even though I'm able to do that for somebody else. I was just like, I can't do this alone. So I got some collaborators, and that's when we started to work on.
Well, there had to have been a moment, something in you that said, "Oh, I can do this."
Yeah, I mean, I mean, it was like a Christmas day. I was Christmas alone. I was spending 1 year Christmas. I can't remember. It was 2021. It was the pandemic. I couldn't travel anywhere. And I was sitting at home alone, and I remember thinking, so maybe for some context, during the pandemic, all of the festival and the theater that I was doing with young people got put into a hold, right? And I had to transfer all of that into like film. And the way that I did it is with Zoom calls. I would then take the footage and then I would spend all night. I mean, I'm telling you, all night editing, finding stock footage, finding footage that I would ask my students to film and go to parks and we need a bird. Find me a bird, right? And they would go film a bird, and I would go film birds with our phones. And then I would spend time editing and editing and editing and editing. And that's when I started, like, I think it was at Christmas. I just go, wait a minute. I don't need a lot of things. I know how to tell a story. I know how to write a story. I know how to like express myself. And I know how to like have all these tools. I know how to edit well. I know how to create something. And I think it was one that Christmas night, I was sitting at home and I go, literally said to myself, this year I'm going to make a movie, which sounded insane. And and then I saw on Facebook a friend of mine who's a screenwriter in New York who had done a device play a while back from that same community saying, "Oh, I'm looking for to collaborate on writing something." And it was like the next day, Nick, that I saw that Facebook post, and it was almost as if we were connected.
Hmm.
And, and I sent her a message and I go, "Yeah, me too. Let's do something." And she wrote basically the big first draft of Safe Word. It was her.
I always wonder if moments like that are like divine intervention
Mhm.
or if it's truly like in the brain because the particular activating system of you start to look for it in your view, right? Because that message might have come on your Facebook and you would have passed right on by it the day before.
Right. I mean, I think it's somewhat a combination of both, right? But I think it's truly you have to pay attention to it. Like your
Yeah.
brain is looking for those things. Um, yeah, that was a wild time. And then it took a year. It took me a year to even put it together. That's but never giving
Creative
up.
process, never giving up. Creative process.
And throughout it, you have moments where you doubt. I would doubt myself. I would moments where I would pause, reflect, fundraise, figure out what kind of music, what world is this living in. You know, I knew very little about film festivals or the film industry. I mean, I had been doing device theater in New York for forever,
Yeah.
and community-centric theater here in DC. I have no idea about films, but you kind of go for it.
And you did,
Yeah.
and it's been wildly well received. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. Surprisingly, it's
Not
crazy.
surprisingly, it's a good film because I had the pleasure to see it. It's a very good film. It was my favorite of all the films of that festival,
Oh,
PS.
yeah. That's great.
Um, and it's really fantastic. So congratulations. And it's not a small feat, honestly, to create a film from scratch, from midair, from the brainchild, from sweat equity, from financial equity, from all of those pieces. So
Yeah,
I want to commend you, really.
thank you. Yeah, it's been remarkable, and I have to really watch out for the imposter syndrome that comes in,
Yeah.
right? There are times where I would get like a piece of press, and I would, it would be super positive. And I would make excuses not to validate that. I would be like, well, they that writer knew me from before. So they just want to be nice to me. Or well, that it's because, I got a lot of press here in DC, and I would be like, well, it's because I'm local. And so they want to give attention to the local person. And it's true. That's
Yeah.
can be true, but they don't have to
Well, it's partially true, but they don't have to do that.
do that.
Yeah. I
Um,
think I mentioned this to you when we were at dinner but I haven't talked about this on the podcast, that I had this acquaintance who congratulated me, who is somebody who went to film school and has wanted to be a filmmaker, but has that's not where their path has taken them. They congratulated me, and I really sort of blew it off, like, uh-huh, whatever. They're like, that award, you got that award, congratulations. And I was like, uh-huh, because in my brain, I couldn't A, receive that, right? Couldn't actually take that in to talk about that. We were just talking about that receptivity, but also my brain went to, well, it's not an Oscar,
right, right.
so it's not that worthy. Who am I?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. But it's still, they don't have to give you that award.
Right,
They don't have to give you that award. They could just
right.
not give it to you, give it to someone else. But
Yes,
it shows you, which
yes.
they should have, because your film is also pretty incredible. And
Well,
yeah. And uh, yeah, there was a connection because I think there's an investigation that's similar to, you know, and this goes down to the imposter syndrome and all of that, right? It's like the compare and despair thing, right? It's sort of like I'm not getting in the cover of like Variety magazine, or I'm not getting, a GLAAD award for this film, therefore it's not good enough. And then you see on social media, and this happens to a lot of artists, myself included, right? And now even more that now I'm in an industry where I'm, going to film festivals, you get to meet people who are more successful than you, right? And you become friends on social media, and you see them with hundreds of thousands of followers, right? And like, all this press, and you automatically go, well, then my work is not good enough,
mm,
right? But they're fans of yours too, right? And you got there just as much as everyone is. It's just it's everyone's different. And I say this out loud to repeat it to myself, not to be above it, but to remind myself that that is just like a natural thing that I personally do to myself. I compare and despair very often.
as a coach,
Mhm.
that's one of the biggest things that I see
Yeah, yeah,
is imposter syndrome, especially with coaching people to get up on stage to speak.
yeah,
That all of that all those old stories from the childhood, the bullies, all of the shame and the repression from being a queer kid, all of that comes into play here, right? It roars into the brain, and like you said, those wires that fire together in the 30 years, it doesn't go away overnight, right? And so it's this process of shifting those wires and shifting those beliefs and shifting and the key that you're really talking about here is the awareness
Hmm.
of it, is having that awareness and catching it quicker. That's really the only thing that you can really ultimately do is catch it quicker.
You know, it, the catching it quickly is something that my therapist and I talk about very often because I can see the voice in my head sometimes interject any sort of artistic process or any process in my life. And the time that it takes me for me to feel whatever it is that I'm feeling from that internal voice and counter it, it went from being a really long time to less and less time. Now it's
Hmm.
like a couple of days. Hopefully in the future, hopefully in the future it's just like 30 minutes and I'm
Yeah.
good, right? But it just takes a lot of time. But it's really work. It's like it's the work I have to do all the time to go, wait, hold on a second, what's the fact, what's not the fact. And then another thing that I've noticed is that I myself know, especially when I watch myself on screen, I really have this thought, and it's an experience that's bizarre, as you know, and you know this better than anyone, because you were so vulnerable in your film. Like, oh my God. Um, but I know what I was going through when I was filming that. Like, I know what that set looked like, and I know that someone was holding up a light, right? I know that I was signing and writing on top of an acrylic with the camera underneath, so it doesn't, you know, that's not what the audience sees. They see the story, right? And so they see
Hmm.
the magic of it. But I know that I wasn't connected in some moments, right? I know that I was thinking about, because I was producing it. So I know that I was thinking about, is the catering going to be here on time? I don't want the crew to be hungry, right? And then I'm like having to act. And then you're just like, okay, I'm in this moment right now and I have to like step away, but it's impossible. And I'm like, the camera's going to pick that up. And you do have to put a lot of trust on the people that are with you, the director, the cinematographer, right? That they're also have your back. And but when I see myself and when I see myself on the screen, I just go, oh wow, I remember what I was thinking when that was happening, but the people around me don't.
Yeah.
So I have to detach myself from that. It's impossible. I mean, I have a really impossible time doing that, you know.
Well, I think that it's a process. I think it's a practice. I think that you get better at it the more you do it, right? Um, yeah, I mean, I know for me in my film, there were days that because we shot over 5 years, who I was from day one to who I was at day one, at year one versus year five, or day one versus the final day of year five, totally different human, particularly on camera, particularly my comfortability around it, particularly in the vulnerability. We didn't start with the vulnerable scenes, right? That grew over time of me becoming more and more comfortable, and not only with being on camera that vulnerably, but also sharing in the space with the people that I was around and trusting that they were going to have my back in many ways.
I have a question for you. When the project got put, like when the pandemic happened and you had to sort of hold things. When you came back,
Mhm.
was what did you have a moment where you sort of was like, oh, I'm gonna do this differently or
100%.
oh,
I had time to sit with that material that we had and look at what we had. And there's a part of me that was like, I want to start over.
right.
But I couldn't. Financially, I couldn't. There's no way. I could, but I knew that artistically we were going to take a pivot and it was going to shift a little deeper. That's actually what happened. It gave me this grace period to grow as a human and look at myself on camera and be like, okay, you're not being fully honest here.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so it offered me this opportunity to turn the camera back on and go a level deeper.
Are there moments, and is it completely because, of course, the film is sequential, right? And it's sort of like traveling through time. But are there moments that you sort of filmed? I mean, I'm sure there are, but that are specific towards the end that you put in at the beginning just to give it a sense of, I'm just going into the weaves here. But like, is there things that you played with just because, I don't know if I'm making sense, but you know what I'm saying?
Well, we re-edited so many times, and so much is on, in a doc. There's 300 hours. There's so much that's on the cutting room floor. And we were creating this tapestry that, yes, some things that we filmed later on are very early on in the film now that that maybe would not have been there had we not. And there's also things that we shot that at the very end that ended up not going in that I thought for sure was going to go in. We had me dancing, and I thought for sure that was going to go in the film. But at the end of the day, it just never, we never could find that right fit, even though I desperately wanted it because I really wanted to return to that youth dancer in myself. But it just never, we never could find the right moment or spot for it.
Yeah. That's another thing that I've sort of learned is to let go of a lot of things that you may want or need or feel
Yeah.
like special. And the other people around you go, like they are also artists too.
Yeah.
And they also have like a say. And yeah, that was hard for me. But I was like, I need to trust the people that have more experience than me doing this.
Okay. So speaking of trust,
Yeah.
what is your 5 year from now safe word?
Oh my God, what's my safe word for the next
For five
I
years from now?
5 years from now? I think the concept of a safe word, it's something that again is I don't want to use a safe word. I don't because to me that represents a comfort zone that it's easy for me to be in I grew up in an imaginary space. It's comfortable for me to be in an imaginary space and to create a world that's just mine. And so I don't want to say I quit again, right? I don't want to use a safe word. I want to
But let
go
me
back.
rephrase the question. If you're breaking through the safe word,
Uh-huh.
what is the absolute uncomfortability of 5 years from now? What are you doing?
What am I doing in 5 years from now? Um, I'm making movies and I'm acting in them. And that's really what it is. And they are I mean, I have this big desire, and it's going to happen to tell stories. I've done stories about me, and I want to now tell stories about, like, for example, there's a Venezuelan um, openly gay member of the National Assembly, which is like Congress, who was put in political prison in Venezuela, and he's like my age. And I'm like, I want to tell that story, right? I want
Hmm.
to tell stories of people that I don't think I even knew about. And so I'm really curious to investigate that and continue to make film. That's been sort of now my mission. And then I also see myself singing again.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to let that go. And I've written some stuff and I've written some music, and it's just trying to find the right uh, collaborators and partners.
I'm really glad to hear that because I see you, singing on your Instagram, and I just love it. It's just, it's really great.
It feels like a trick. There's a difference between like when I act. right? And when I make something that's like a written script, and there's something really freeing about music.
Mm. That's how I
It's
feel about dance. That's how I feel about dance.
yeah. You're an amazing dancer.
Well, I was a professional,
Yeah.
early
But I mean,
on.
I think I've danced with you at the film festival.
Yes, that is true. Okay,
With the
how
village people,
to
with
the
the
with the village people,
the actual village
with the
people.
actual village people. Okay, where can everyone see Safe?
Safe word
Word,
can be seen. Safe word.
Safe
Um,
word.
yeah, you can watch Safe Word on Here TV. It just got released there this week, which I don't know what week this is gonna air, but when you Google it, it's gonna
It'll
be
be
there.
there.
It'll be there. Here TV. You can also Google it on YouTube. We're also on a YouTube channel called Stash Shorts. But Here TV is where you can find it. Yeah,
And then where can everyone find you to connect with you?
Instagram is the way to do it at Mauricio Pita.
Okay, we'll make sure that that is in the show notes and a link to see the fantastic film Safe Word. And thank you for your friendship.
Likewise.
Thank you for your heart, which is so huge. And thank you for sharing your time with us today.
Nick, thank you. Thank you for having me. I really enjoy you.
I know that you're going to want to go immediately, not in like a week, not in 2 weeks, like right now to watch that film. So go do that and leave a little note for Maurizio on his Instagram of your favorite moment. And I'll see you on the next episode.